Hello and welcome to the second episode of Politics Unwrapped, going out on Tuesday, the 16th of May, 2023. I'm Toby Mesme. We start with American politics today because discussions about a default on the federal debt are continuing. So the way this works is the Congress, the House and the Senate, when the debt reaches a certain level, the debt of the US government have to raise the debt limit, which is not something you have to do in a lot of countries. And there's basically an artificial level at which the debt that's being accumulated, we're talking about trillions and trillions in debt over a long period of time, of course. This is the case in many big sort of global governments, but massively so in America. The Republicans are newly in control of the House. Kevin McCarthy is the Speaker. And they are demanding, between now and the beginning of June, when the default is likely to occur, massive concessions in terms of spending cuts and fiscal policy that Joe Biden is extremely unlikely to concede, or at least concede most of. There's been another meeting today. The result of the meeting between the various congressional leaders is that the trip that Joe Biden is taking is being partially postponed. He's going over on a sort of global trip, loads of different international things he's doing. He is staying a bit longer than was originally anticipated. The reason he's staying a bit longer than was originally anticipated is right now it doesn't look like we're particularly near a deal. They've been talking for about a week, the two teams related to McCarthy and Biden. Here is what Kevin McCarthy said coming out of the meeting at the White House. Key player.
I think we set the stage to carry on further conversations. You know, we only have 15 days really to go. We've got to find a way that we can curve our spending, raise our debt limit, and also grow our economy. And the president agreed to appoint a couple people from his administration to sit down and negotiate directly with my team, so I found that to be productive personally. But we've got a lot of work to do in a short amount of time. Now, I wish we had been able to be in this place 100 days ago. This is what we requested, but we are where we are, so we will work hard to make sure to try to have this to come to fruition.
Everything these everything these people are saying is designed to not spook the markets. Kevin McCarthy being very careful there. And the line Kevin McCarthy is taking, he can't say, oh my God, it's all done for, nothing's happening, because if he did, the markets would panic. So he's saying, his sort of political line is, Joe Biden's not done enough, but we're okay now, sort of thing. Here's Chuck Schumer, the Democrat, the majority leader in the Senate. There hasn't really been a substantive statement from Biden since the meeting. So in terms of the Democratic view, we'll hear what Schumer has to say here. Senate majority leader. He's not... His role in the Senate comes into place after the House and Biden cooperate on something. But he is basically in lockstep with Joe Biden in terms of his position on all this. So his view can be seen as a proxy of Joe Biden's view at the moment. That might change.
Good and productive meeting. Everyone agreed that default would be the worst outcome, a horrible situation for America and America's families. But we also agreed that we need to pass a bipartisan bill with bipartisan support in both chambers. I asked Speaker McCarthy, does he agree with that? And he said yes. And his bill, of course, is not a bipartisan bill. And so the bottom line is that we all came to agreement that we were going to continue discussions in the way that I believe Speaker McCarthy described, which was agreed to by all of us in the room together. And hopefully we can come to an agreement. We don't have much time, but default is just the worst alternative. And having a bipartisan bill in both chambers is the only way we're going to avoid default. Hakeem and I are committed to trying to get that bipartisan bill done.
So here's the thing. Right now there's a lot of posturing, and it doesn't feel to me like much has shifted in the last week. We get closer and closer. There are a limited amount of days Congress are in session. It looks to me like they're knuckling down. when this sort of crisis last happened was when Republicans took the House, and they came in sort of with a fresh majority in 2011. Similar situation. Barack Obama as president, Senate was Democrats, House was Republicans, and it got to, this was a phase where the Republicans were more moderate than they are now. It still got to the very last minute before a deal was struck. And the deal was substantial concessions to the Republicans from the Democrats. What's going to happen here makes me think it's going to drag out until the last minute. That's where I'm reading it right now. Watch this week. If by the end of this week, if we're hearing nothing new, we're heading to the brink. But the fact we're heading to the brink doesn't necessarily mean we're heading over the edge or we're likely to head over the edge, simply because the incentives lean towards getting a deal for everyone involved. Politically speaking, it's catastrophic for Joe Biden if there's a default. And it's potentially catastrophic for, if not Republicans overall, House Republicans and the reputation of Kevin McCarthy. If he is viewed, if he is viewed as the orchestrator of this, he's viewed as the one at fault. He might not be, but he could be. He'll be an international pariah for causing a global economic meltdown. So we'll find out. Again, this story is not being covered enough around the world. And it's being viewed through a very narrow party political lens. We're talking about a very serious issue here that could have global economic ramifications. America is the global economic superpower. And the Republicans are demanding some pretty severe actions before they do what has always been done. So we'll see what happens. Now, over to the UK. The National Conservatism Conference continues. A alliance of the right wing of the Conservative Party with various agitators and, should we say, people with strong opinions about cultural issues coming from the cultural far right, if you like. Douglas Murray here, from The Spectator and the New York Post and The Sun, doing a speech that has been all over social media today. And just listen to it, but there is a statement in here. And Michael Gove was at this today, Jacob Rees-Mogg yesterday. This is not the kind of thing that the Conservative Party is going to want to be its public image. And this is what's going out at the moment in the news.
This is in some ways still a controversial thing to say, because in Europe in particular, nationalism, after all, sounds different depending on the country you're in. Nationalism in Israel sounds different to nationalism in America, sounds different to nationalism in Italy, sounds different to nationalism here in Britain. But the cordon sanitaire, which used to exist around nationalism until recent years, existed not because we didn't trust the idea of love of country, not because, I would argue, there was anything wrong with nationalism in a British context. It all came from a recognition that there was a problem with nationalism in a German context. And that is simply a historical fact. But I see no reason why every other country in the world should be prevented from feeling pride in itself because the Germans mucked up twice in a century.
So there's laughing and sort of a light-hearted line. This is obviously referring to the Holocaust and fascism in Europe, in the Italian context, in the German context. Very, very, very serious issues. Trivialised there. That has been doing the rounds. And that is just completely... I mean, besides the statement itself, which is obviously appalling, it is absolutely toxic that is the image right now that's going out around the Conservative Party. We're going to get into some polling in a minute. I'd be very interested to see a focus group where some of these speeches were played back, because it would be interesting to see. My suspicion is the reaction of most voters to these kind of... Not just this is the extreme example, but most of what's been going on at this conference would be bewilderment. Because priority number 1, priority number 2, and priority number 3 for the British public right now is their energy bills, and it's inflation, and it's the cost of living. And it's not this, whatever this is. And that is, in fairness, what the Sunak administration broadly accept, because they're trying not to talk about these kind of things too much, but too much of the cabinet and too much of the party want to go in that direction, and it looks like they're heading in that direction. This is, the driving force, sort of the energy pulling the carriages of modern conservatism in Britain is basically this. Okay, on to polling. We've got some YouGov polling up here over the last couple of days. Very interesting. Now, disclaimer, caveat, YouGov, when it comes to politicians, generally have lower approval ratings. Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak's ratings are both lower than they are with other pollsters, Keir Starmer especially. But here are the ratings. Keir Starmer, favourable, 35%, unfavourable, 51%. That's a new low for Keir Starmer, as far as I'm aware. That is a bad approval rating for an opposition leader. Opposition leaders don't normally win elections when they have approval ratings like that. For a number of reasons, Keir Starmer is quite likely to be the exception. Rishi Sunak, and that's to do with the Conservative Party. Rishi Sunak, 59%, so nearly 60% unfavourable, 31% favourable. It's not good. That is actually bad. Prime ministers have had worse. And with other pollsters, Rishi Sunak is doing better. Quite a few pollsters have sort of Sunak, -10, Starmer maybe +5. Generally speaking, across the board, Keir Starmer is at least marginally more popular than Rishi Sunak. In some polls, he is considerably, and that gap has been widening in some polls recently, considerably more popular than Rishi Sunak. So sort of the media myth that Keir Starmer is less popular is wrong. The media myth that Rishi Sunak is very popular is also wrong. But Rishi Sunak's ratings generally aren't catastrophic. Here they are bad, very bad. Keir Starmer's here, bad, absolutely bad for an opposition leader that wants to be Prime Minister. And it doesn't bode well. When you come into power, it may change. Maybe Keir Starmer gets a big boost of popularity, sort of a fresh look when he becomes Prime Minister. However, generally speaking, ratings like this, it makes me think you're standing in government, if you aren't delivering very quickly or you aren't viewed as effective very quickly, is as Prime Minister, you will be very unpopular very quickly, because if this is how you are in opposition, that unfavourable can be 60, 70% quite quickly once you're in government. If things aren't going your way, which they might not be if you take power in the middle of sort of cascading economic crises without a very clear view of what you're going to do, because obviously at the moment, people of most political persuasions would accept Labour don't have a very firm idea of their plans for government. That may change between now and then. A number of things may change between now and then. That's a big structural weakness. Now, the political parties, this is a big turnaround, considering Labour's brand in 2019 was absolutely toxic for a number of reasons. Labour, favourable, 41%, unfavourable, 48%. Labour is more popular than Keir Starmer. It's less unpopular and more popular than Keir Starmer. Conservative Party, unfavourable, 66%, favourable, 22%. And since Rishi Sunak has become Prime Minister, it's maybe nudged up from 18% to around 20% favourability for the Tories. And it's stayed there. It went up to maybe 25, it came back down to 22. The Conservative Party is absolutely toxic as a brand. It is more unpopular than any other political party in the UK by a long way. And that is what is driving polling. Whether if Rishi Sunak's ratings are competitive with Keir Starmer's at the time of the next election, it's entirely possible. That doesn't matter so much because the Conservative Party brand is in tatters and right now it isn't recovering. Could it recover somewhat between now and the next election? Yes. Is it at the moment? No. For instance, the polls have narrowed, right? We've gone from like a 20-point lead to a 15-point lead for Labour. Maybe we're going back to a 16, 17, 18-point lead now. The Conservative Party has not improved. And until it does, and until the economic fundamentals shift and a number of things change, right now, the state of public opinion is going to be decidedly anti-Tory. And that is the state of play now, and it's likely to be the state of play in the months to come. And we're just going to have to wait and see if anything can shift that dial. Anywhere near what the Conservatives need to do to start looking at the electoral mountain. They have to climb between now and May or September or October. Take your pick, 2024. You get conflicting reports in papers. Most seem to be saying October, but then some are saying May. So who knows? Now looking at this next bit of polling, this is which of these electoral outcomes appeal to you. It's looking at the public. what result would you like to see after the next general election? 26% of voters would like a Labour outright majority. 18%, that's sort of the core base, right, would like a Conservative majority. That's even less people than have a favourable view of the Conservative Party. 12% of people would like a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition government, which is surprising you've got that many people saying that. Now, the interesting thing here, actually, is when you look at Labour, nearly 20% of their voters want a coalition. When you look at the Liberal Democrats, yeah, sure, 32% want a Lib Dem majority. Joe Swinson, one moment there. 37% want a Labour Lib Dem coalition. 9% want a Labour majority. I don't know what the thinking is there, but cool. Worked out for them quite well during New Labour, I suppose. And 11% want a Conservative Lib Dem coalition. The public itself is not keen on a Conservative Lib Dem coalition. 9% of Conservatives would like that. 82% of Conservatives. The Conservatives are coalescing around the Conservatives. They want a Conservative government after the next election, obviously. Now, looking at this, sort of in the 40s, you add up sort of a Labour-led government, you've probably got, 38, 42% of people wanting some kind of anti-Tory government. You factor in Labour SNP, very unpopular, but there is still a small segment wanting that. If you factor that in with some other polling recently indicating that a Labour Liberal government, while viewed as less stable than a Labour majority government, was viewed as stable as a Conservative majority government, it seems to me that voters see as broadly acceptable a Labour majority and a Labour Liberal Democrat coalition. They are not keen on a Conservative majority, but they are even less keen on a Labour SNP government or a Tory DUP government. But the interesting takeaways from this were the tribalism of Tory voters relative to Labour voters, Liberal Democrats really leaning towards Labour, unsurprising but noteworthy. Voters overall preferring the idea of a Labour government of some kind to a Conservative government by a considerable margin of some 15 to 20 points. Unsurprising. And Labour and SNP remaining a very unpalatable concept to a lot of voters. Whether or not that would be an unstable government, it is viewed as a very unstable combination by the British public. That's it from Politics Unwrapped for today. We'll be back tomorrow. The podcast will be up again, same time. The stream will be up again, same time. Thanks so much for listening. It's been a pleasure keeping you informed, and we'll be back next time.